Welcome to Guys, the podcast about guys. I am Bryan, a frugal boy, and I would like to introduce Mr. Money Mustache, Chris James. How are you?
What? Wait, you can't. It's not fair to just like give me these bad nicknames.
But that's a guy. You're gonna be fucking amped to find out who Mr. Money Mustache is.
Oh, it's a real person.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were just mocking me in like sort of a weird way. No, okay, that's cool then. So we're doing Cheap Guys. That's the episode.
Yeah, and we brought somebody who the Patreon got to hear, the first ever guest on Guys Plus. We got Tom Walker. Hi, Tom.
What's up, guys? Immediately honored to be here, and do want to immediately push back on Bryan's self-identification as a cheap guy, because you're saying that with a Lego in frame, Bryan. Like, we can't be. We can't say that you're good with money when
I tried. I said this before we started, before I went to do this. I was like, I'm a cheap motherfucker. And this is like the first episode where it's like, this is really the type of guy I am. And then people started replying to me and saying, didn't you accidentally buy $10,000 worth of Legos in like a year? And I'm like, yeah, that was an accident though. I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
do you think you're the kind of cheap guy that you'll get the cheap beans at the store, for example, but so
hang on. So what led you to think you were a cheap guy in any way? Are you just delusional? Are you?
It's not that it's delusional as much as it's like I don't like how much things cost. I think
but you buy things all the time. So much of this podcast is you talking about like buying streetwear or Lego.
He hates how expensive it is. I guess that's why he thinks it's a cheap guy. Like, he thinks that people who aren't cheap are just like excited about paying a bunch of money for something. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying a little bit, Bryan, in that you like feel like a cheap guy because you feel this like guilt when you're buying it, like you don't have enough money to be buying it. But I don't think you are a cheap guy, and I think that's what you're saying here is that you learn that you're not, right?
When people started saying like, how could you possibly spend that much on Legos? And then before Legos, it was the hype beast stuff, and then before that, it was I don't even know. I'll say this: when MP3 players came out, I had 6 before most people bought one.
What the fuck do you mean?
What's wrong with that?
What do you mean you had 6?
Why?
You were looking at a bandolier system for these? You had them assigned to genres?
I'm working at the cable company in 2000, from 2002 to 2009.
No, you're getting smart.
Yeah.
He says he's working at the cable company instead of saying he was the cable guy because he knows what I'll do if he says
that's really good.
So I buy an MP3 player to listen to in the van. With one of the, do you remember when they sold MP3 players and then you had to buy one of those Belkin things you plug into it that puts it on 88.3 on your radio? And
I do remember that, definitely. But so I'm with you so far on the first on the first MP3 player.
Who could be against a man purchasing his first MP3 player?
And I think it's. We understand the necessity even for that first. I think it's the additional 5.
I predict myself falling off at MP3 player number 2, 3 at a maximum.
I'm gonna say I only understand MP3 player number 1.
So I bought the first one and it was cheap, and I shouldn't have bought that one. Like, it was like a $50 or something. It was just some price that was like, it was never gonna actually be good. I think it was RCA brand, which is like
it's even like just normal. I think that's a normal brand, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's a cheap one.
So then that thing fucking breaks, and I tell my wife like, well, that broke because I bought it cheap, so I bought an expensive one for number 2, and then that one broke. And then I was like, you know what? You can't buy a cheaper one than the one that just broke. So I buy a more expensive one. And then I went off on this little tangent where I started buying different Sirius XM radios, where I bought the XM MiFi, which was
I didn't know people really. I thought people only
$400 for the radio.
Yeah, dude, you could get that in the car. in the car. How much is a car version of it? Like not even that
70.
amount.
It was $70.
I think it would have been cheaper to just leave your car running near wherever you were and just have it blasting out the window.
I've
Bryan.
never heard of anyone having a MiFi. The only person I've ever heard, I think, is like Bobo on Opie and Anthony that had a MiFi or wanted one.
I had two of them.
Yeah, wow.
Because it broke.
Why were you breaking them out of curiosity?
People say I'm hard on stuff. Like my wife and stuff will say, like, "Oh, you're hard on everything."
I see. You just like treat it kind of roughly, like you just sort of like, you don't like wrap up the cord nicely, like you just kind of wrap the cord around the MP3 player and stick it in your pocket. That kind
Brian's buying a $300 MP3 player and he's hitting it to start it like the Fonz. He's just fucking laying into it, just a spinning back fist every time he wants to hear Korn.
Well, the MP3, the MiFi had like an antenna on it that was like, you're supposed to like clip it on your clothes or whatever when you're out walking around. But I wasn't out walking around. I was working. So I just hung it out the window of my van. And
Wait a second. Why didn't you get the van? The one that goes in the van.
That was another $80. And that's where I'm saying. Like,
no. But originally.
Because I thought you could walk around with it and record it.
Because nowadays that would be because you obviously walk around all the time, but you're saying at this point in your life you were not walking around.
No, I didn't walk much, but I wanted to like have it so that when I'm climbing poles at the cable company, I can have it.
Or when I know, and then or when you're at hedonism, climbing poles, wherever it may be.
When I was working in the backyard, but I found out it didn't even work when you were in the backyard. You know what I mean?
You had to be in the front yard?
No, it just didn't work. The thing was a piece of shit.
What is this item, and what are you hanging out of the window of your van?
It's a thing to listen to Sirius satellite radio because it was like, the only way to listen to it at that point was in your car, and then they made these MiFi things that you could carry around with you and listen, and very few people used them. They were not popular.
Yeah, and so then
when you look at a picture of it, you're like, that's barely portable, because it was
too big. Too big. Yeah, it was too big.
Bryan bought the non-car version of a seemingly car exclusive item and then hung it out of his van anyway.
You got it.
Do you understand how I feel like I'm solving a riddle here? I can't.
Yeah.
It just made sense.
This started off with the conversation about how Bryan thought he was a cheap guy as well.
Once that thing, the second one bit the dust, I went and bought another MP3 player, started downloading Opie and Anthony and Ron and Fez, putting it on the MP3 player, and then that thing broke. So I bought another one. And then finally, when smartphones came out, I was like, oh, good, I can stop buying these fucking MP3 players. I was buying them all the time. I was buying them like fucking 3 a year at some points because they were just breaking all the fucking time. The things break. They're
but I understand they do sometimes. I had them growing up, but not 3 a year. That's operator error, or like you're responsible for it. Like I have to agree with your wife that I think you're probably kind of hard on electronics, maybe.
Just everything. So then, like,
just
everything. I do. I'm really hard on stuff. People are maybe right. Like I sit down hard, so I break chairs a lot of times.
Bryan just has like a damage field around him.
I do.
I do.
Just sit down hard,
putting damage.
And that's what made me less cheap. Is then my wife was like, "Well, you got to stop buying all this cheap stuff because you're ripping holes in your pants all the time." And so then it became like, well, I'll spend a little more money on nice stuff. And then I got addicted to the Hypebeast thing. And I'd still be doing the Hypebeast thing if it wasn't for the Legos. The Legos got so expensive. I was like, one of these has got to go. And I like the Legos more. But even in the early Lego thing,
the clothes that you wear.
Well, I still have a lot of expensive clothes.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, and if you're not like a real, they can last you a long time because they're good quality. And so if you're not really into the hype of it, then you've just got a bunch of good clothes if you don't mind wearing them.
Yeah, and the Lego stuff it really did start out like I'm not going to buy a Lego set more than $100.
That was what you initially said.
That's what I initially said. Now
Mhm.
I'm buying. I mean, I hate to say it on the show how much I've spent on some of these sets. Like,
I mean, you did show a photograph of your dookie to everyone, so
see
I
that
feel like
castle up there on top of my thing there.
yeah,
It's
we're looking at
beautiful,
it right
dear.
now.
Pac-Man, and then a big building up there.
Oh, okay. So that's
Wow,
like a
yeah.
Pac-Man arcade game that you've built there out of Lego.
Yeah, that was $250, but that green house next to it was $475. I bought
They and this is you're buying these direct from Lego.
the store. Yeah, I go to the store and
So
buy
these
it.
guys, so Lego, these Lego
They're
people
fucking,
are
yeah.
they are absolutely ripping people off.
You just can't. You if you tell me you're cheap and broke and you're on the Legos, I know you're full of shit because
That's you. That's what you were doing.
I
Yeah,
know.
that's
I know.
So you've just why did you say that?
Well,
Because-
he's realized that he's totally full of shit.
But I
mean,
don't like spending money. I'll tell you, I don't like spending money.
But
and
no
it
one does.
does
Like
make
no
me
one's
mad.
like.
Yeah.
I think Brian. I think you think that for someone else, seeing like $100 leave their bank account feels the same as like when cum leaves your balls. But it doesn't. I don't think
only for
I don't
really
think
rich
spending-
guys. You have to be like very,
Yeah.
very rich, for that to not matter. I think otherwise, certainly for me, and I've mentioned I live in Vancouver where it's become almost unlivably expensive, and so you do kind of have to be a cheap. Like I'm gonna definitely find a lot of like I'm not gonna really be able to make fun of these people too much. I don't think, because I'm really gonna understand where they're coming from.
I mean,
So
some stuff I think I did end up finding myself sort of agreeing with them.